Hi, and welcome to the Higher Education Access Corner. I'm Tiffanie Diona, and we are excited because today is Hot Topic, so I have with me
Deanna Brown.
All right, so we are going to bring you some FAFSA news for 2025. Let's start to dig in it. Deanna, has been a lot going on with FAFSA.
Yes.
Everything from 24-25, and we all know the 24-25 rollout of the FAFSA, the new and improved FAFSA, and I'll say that with quotations, the new and improved from 24-25 had a lot of blunders, a lot of struggles and things like that. They were working through it, and now we're hopeful because we're at the 25-26. So let's talk about where they're at with it. You want to get started just with the beta testing and how things were going?
Yeah, so FIA was one of the FAFSA beta testers, so we were able to do some testing for the 25-26 FAFSA for a number of schools throughout the Commonwealth. For the most part, it was a good process. You know, students did have to create their studentaid.gov account as well as their contributors. And then they also had to fill out a student interest form indicating their interest in doing the FAFSA beta testing. Once those two steps were done, you know, the department validated that they had a valid studentaid.gov account on file. And then we had several events during the FAFSA beta testing period. And I think for the most part, it went pretty well. I think that this is a way for the department to kind of iron out any glitches that they see prior to the full FAFSA opening on December the 1st. So we really didn't notice any major hiccups in regards to the FAFSA beta testing. I think that there are some areas that they could probably make a little bit more clear. One of the things that some of our families struggled with is the section where it talks about the family size, and that information is actually imported from their IRS tax return. One of the things that I think is confusing is that when you look at the number on there, families assume that that's the number that was imported from their taxes, but the number that they see on the FAFSA is actually a number that is contrived from how the student has answered questions on the FAFSA itself. So what the department recommended is that for families that have not changed anything from their tax return, to just leave that number as is on the FAFSA. If something did change in their family size after they filed their taxes, then that's when they want to go on and update that information.
So for clarification, so let me back up just a little bit, because we're using the term beta testing, and I just realized not all of our listeners might know what beta testing is. So just like a quick recap, the full version of 25-26 is not yet fully functioning and up and going. So in order to work out the kinks, they're doing a testing. And during the testing, it's like a 3 or 4, like 4, I think 4 beta testing. So beta testing 1, 2, 3, and 4. With each round, they're allowing more live users to go into the real FAFSA form to kind of test it out. And if things progress, they move to the next phase. We were at beta test 3. So these are things that were coming up. And as they were going through 1 and 2, as they were noticing things that weren't quite as right, they had opportunities to fix it. With the overall goal being that by December 1st, we are up and going with a fully functioning FAFSA where it's minimal errors, or at least the errors that are there should not prevent any families from completing the FAFSA. And then one of the big things, like you said, for the family size, that was an issue last year, I know, where folks were confused, like, well, how do I know what it was? And I did not know that the number that they were seeing was what FAFSA itself was trying to figure out. So for that user, because you saw the beta testings, okay, so for the user, just for clarification, it's going to import the actual number that is there, but they don't see the number. And that's the part that we need to be.
Right.
And for whatever reason, FAFSA is going to show a number based off of what they think it looks like.
Yes, and when you actually get to that screen, if you look at the instructions, it does say that on there.
Okay.
It says that this number is based on basically your previous answers.
Okay.
So it does clarify for families that that is not the number that was imported from the tax return.
Okay.
You know, for privacy, I guess, purposes, they do not show the families what was imported from the IRS. So it's kind of like a good faith thing for families to distrust that that number was imported correctly. So when we did inquire about this with the department, they clarified that and said, yes, it is a bit confusing, but this is, you know, how we would counsel families when they get to that part.
And that's something that's going to remain that way for this 25-26.
25-26 FAFSA, correct.
Might be too soon to ask, but did they say anything about them trying to make it more user-friendly in that piece for an upcoming version,
They
maybe?
said that they would take that feedback back.
Okay.
But again, if you do look on that screen and you read the paragraph underneath that section, it does say that.
Okay.
It does. I think it's just one of those things when you're just going over it real quick, you're not really looking at every little instruction on that page. But if you read that, it does tell families that it was contrived from how they answered questions throughout the FAFSA and not from the IRS.
Which is good to know, because as we're helping folks out with FAFSA completions, and for those who are listening, now they'll know to pause a little bit and go through, read the screens.
Right. So basically, in other words, if nothing changed from your taxes, you don't need to worry about updating that. If something changed, then you want to go in and update that.
And if they are not sure, they should go and refer to their tax return?
Absolutely. Look at their tax return if they're not sure what they put for their family size.
That works. And for the most part, you think we're fingers crossed, we're pretty much in a good position now to...
Yeah. One of the other things that I think will really help with a lot of families is they have provided a lot more customer service reps for the call center. And I know that was an issue last year with people not being able to get through when they needed help with the FAFSA. So they really increased the number of call center reps for that phone number. The other thing that they've enhanced this year is for families that need help in other languages. They also have specific resources to help families with not just Spanish, but a numerous amount of other languages. So I think those additional resources will also help some families navigate through the 25-26 FAFSA.
And then for clarity, it's still Spanish and English. You can actually convert it to a Spanish FAFSA. The other ones, they're just assisting with the other language. It's not a convert, it's just an assist. Right.
So if they need help with translations in various different languages, they'll be able to reach out to the department or FSA with call center reps, and they can contact them on chat, I believe, to assist with those other languages.
Okay. I really like the part where they're going to increase the customer service staff.
Yes.
Because that was a pain point for not just students, for schools, for folks like us. So it was everyone. I still say my favorite feature is the chat feature, because you can get to them the quickest. But again, last year that was even a bit of a challenge. So I'm excited this year to see what that part is going to look like as far as one of the enhanced things. So while we're talking about enhancements, let's talk about some other things that are new. The new IRS import screen, that's a big one. You and I were just talking about that last year, how it works. So all federal tax information can automatically be transmitted over for most users that are in the household contributors. And last year, it did it after they provided the consent, but you didn't know. So a lot of the questions, as you know, were at what point do I enter my information? Well, did it do it? Am I done? Especially for those where the FAFSA did work for them. And they're going to like, well, it says I'm done, but I never once entered my tax return. So what they've done now is they do that. They still have to provide their consent to allow the information to be shared from the IRS with the Department of Ed, with FIAs, the schools, things like that. But it now gives them a prompt, a screen pops up that tells them it was successfully transmitted. So it was successful. And that way, that alleviates that question of, well, what happened? Did my information go through? The other part was there are still some families who may have to manually enter their federal tax information. It's also going to let them know, I think it says oops, like oops, you know, it wasn't able to transmit your information, so they'll have to manually enter it. And that process pretty much is still the same thing. There are still those resources and tools that will guide them through saying go to your tax return on this line, enter whatever you need in this particular line for the FAFSA. So it still works with them and gives them that information. So I did like seeing that.
I like them confirming that the information was actually transferred from the IRS, so families get that confirmation. I think that was a good enhancement.
Me too. And I think that was one of the best, because we talk about all of the difficulties so much with FAFSA. That really is a good enhancement. I think when they revamped it so that families don't have to enter all of that information or use the data retrieval tool, which wasn't always successful. So I do like that FTI, federal tax information, gets transferred over. Another thing was the enhanced parent wizard.
Yes.
Did you get a chance to see that?
Yes.
So,
I think I like that too because they made it available outside of the FAFSA. So for families who are struggling with, okay, which contributor, how do I determine who contributes to the student's FAFSA, you can actually go through that wizard outside of the FAFSA prior to completing the form to kind of go through and see who is the appropriate contributor on the application. So I do really like that they did that.
Me too, yeah. And they can do it now, so that's not something they actually have to wait. Like if I went out to FAFSA.gov, and when you go out there, it'll say learn more, you click on that and it opens up the parent wizard. And when they're there, it's almost talking to the student like we would if we're saying, okay, we are looking at your legal parent, what's the name of parent 1, parent 2, they name them, and it just goes through the questions, and at the end it lets them know this is who needs to provide it. If they've been remarried, it tells them that information. So to me, that's an easy thing, and I think for a family who, for the student, if they're not sure which parent, that's something they can do now. They don't have to wait until the new FAFSA opens up, and then that appropriate parent or household can start to be prepared for what they need to do. I do like that.
One thing I'll mention too for our schools that are listening, in case you're not aware, we also have a nice handout that will guide families through how to determine who the contributor is. It's called Who Needs to Create a StudentAid.gov account, and that's something that you can actually order on our website, and you can have that stocked in your offices, whether you're a high school or post-secondary school. So that's an additional tool that can also help families determine that.
That's a good point too. And the website's phea.org for those who didn't remember, PHEAA.org. Any other things that stood out to you during the beta testing that you were saying, hey, this is a nice enhancement or new change?
I can't think of anything else. I think that the other thing that I'll mention is that the department also actually participated with some StudentAid.gov workshops where families were going in and creating their accounts to see what issues families were encountering through that process. So I think that that was kind of insightful for the department because they were able to see, hey, these are some of the error messages people might be getting, and then kind of trying to troubleshoot to see how they could fix those different things. So that's another thing that I think that should be an improvement on the 25-26 FAFSA is for people that were having problems creating their StudentAid.gov account. I think that they'll be able to have some additional resources for families with that, given the insight that they saw through the FAFSA beta testing.
And I know that the contributors who don't have a Social Security number, that whole process is not still fully resolved, but they did say that they will be allowed to actually go in and complete what needs to be done while that verification process is still being worked through.
Yes, that's an important enhancement as well. Yes, they did do that to make it easier for those families.
And then I also read it was saying that the student or the contributor are not required to re-sign if the counterpart didn't update their data, and I saw that on the beta testing information, how it comes out. So I don't know if any of that came up, but they were like, anytime a student made a change. Remember last year, the student would complete it, the parent would complete it, and if one of them went in and made a change, it told them that their signature was missing, and they had to go back in and redo it.
Right.
So they're saying that part should not happen anymore. So if the student does it, parent signs it. If student or parent has to go back in, those signatures, the previous signatures of the other person will stay. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they're either going to test that or they know for sure that part is working.
Yes. And I think one of the things, too, that we saw last year, it seems to work better if the student starts the application. So goes through their entire part of the FAFSA form, even up to the signature, signing the FAFSA, then have the contributor come in, do their part, and then sign the FAFSA. The only exception to that is that something that the department did say this year is for families for contributors that don't have a Social Security number, they actually recommended for those families for the contributor to start the application and then invite the student in. They said it's an easier process for those families if they do it that way, who don't have a Social Security number.
That's good to know too.
But for everyone else, have the student start it, sign it, then have the contributor come in, do their part, and sign it. And usually it worked pretty well last year. Yeah. I'm sure probably well this year as well. So
I agree. Once we figured that out, we were like, okay, and then it was kind of smooth sailing most of the time. With those, they did say they would have some additional help tools, and I don't know if you saw the little question, how they would have a question mark beside the little tooltip question mark beside most of the questions. Did that remain?
I don't think it's a question mark, but there's definitely a help feature.
Okay, beside all of the questions still.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
That was always one of my favorite features because it's kind of like if a parent is freezing, we're not there, they have nobody there to assist them, they can click on it and it's going to open up another box or something to share additional details on how to get through that question. And I always thought that was especially helpful when we got to the asset section.
Yes.
So when they're talking about assets, what's an asset, what's not, it's going to give them everything that they needed in that. So how can the students and parents prepare? That's the easy part, but that's the hard part sometimes, and that's where we get most of the questions.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the first thing that families want to do, and this is something you can do right now prior to the FAFSA opening, is the student and the contributors need to go on to studentaid.gov and create an account. Get that started now. Make sure that you keep whatever user ID and password that you create in a safe place, because you're going to need that going forward, not only for this year's FAFSA, but in all the subsequent years that the student is in college. So I think, hands down, that's the number one thing that families can do to prepare right now. There's tons of resources on our website to assist families with that. Again, we talked earlier about, going through that parent wizard to see who the contributor is, so that you can determine who needs to create the studentaid.gov account, and making sure that all of that information is verified prior to you completing your FAFSA. Typically, our recommendation is to do it about 4 days prior to you starting the FAFSA. So that's our number. I think I'll probably be our number one thing you can do to prepare.
I would agree. And there was a tip I saw, I think it was on studentaid.gov when I was perusing through, and it was a good tip. They were saying for the student and the parent, once the parent creates it, to take a snapshot of it, of what their credentials were. How did they enter their name, date of birth, things like that, and share it.
How do they answer those security questions?
Those security questions, so that they can remember, because for a couple of reasons. They were like, number one, when the student has to invite the parent, they need to make sure that they spelled their name, the email address, not the email, their name, their date of birth, and the social security number appears exactly as it appears when they created their studentaid.gov account. And the other part is, if they do get locked out or they do forget and they need to reset their password, a lot of times they'll say, well, I have no idea what my security questions were or what my answers were.
Right.
Well, if they have a copy of that and they took a screenshot of it, of course, keep it in a secure place, they'll be able to unlock it and reset their passwords a lot sooner. So that was a good tip that I saw. I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Another thing that students should keep in mind and make sure that you're communicating with your contributor, your parent, is you need to use the same email address when you invite your parent that the parent used when they created their studentaid.gov account. We did see that a few times during the beta testing, where the student had sent the email invitation using a different parental email address than the parent used when they created their studentaid.gov account.
So I have a question on that, because last year they were saying they could use any email address and the parent would still get the invite. And then
no, they have to use the one that's
so now it has to be the one that's connected to
it has
the
to be the one that's connected to the studentaid.gov account. And we also saw situations where maybe let's say the father created a studentaid.gov account and the mom didn't. Well, the student would send the invitation to the mom, and then it wouldn't link up because the mom didn't even create a studentaid.gov account. So you just kind of have to sit down as a family and make sure you have all your ducks in order. I've created the account. This is the email address that I've used. So when a student puts that in a FAFSA, it works, as it should.
Yep. And another one issue while we're talking about the studentaid.gov account, kind of like errors, is if the student didn't know their parent's social security number, they would check the box that my parent does not have an SSN. And that's not true. They did. They just didn't know it. So they needed to communicate with their parents to make sure they're entering the social security number and the correct social security number for their parent or parents that were required to do it. Excuse me. The other thing I say is things that they can do right now: attend a financial aid night presentation, in person or virtually. Most of the schools, community organizations locally are offering them. Of course, with all of our 13 access partners, we're just about everywhere throughout the state of PA. But we also hold them virtually. And at the end, I'll list some of those resources on how they can find those events. But whether it's a recorded session or whether it's one that's coming up, because we have a couple that are coming up, I think those are pretty good to look at, to make sure that you understand the whole process of financial aid, why it is that you need to complete the FAFSA. And those are just things we've talked about before, and they'll get those refreshers where it's key that they do it. Something else students can do now, you can't complete your FAFSA right now, but you can research the schools you're interested in attending and know what the deadlines are if any of those schools have priority filing deadlines. Because students have to list the names of the schools they're interested in attending in order to be considered for financial aid. And they don't have to have applied or been accepted, but they need to know the list of schools. So if you know what schools you might be interested in, you'll know those are the schools you need to list, because without listing them, they don't get access to the information. So that's key as well. Yep. And sometimes during the financial aid nights, through the FAFSA completion sessions, they're like, oh, I didn't think about the schools yet.
Right.
Okay,
no.
well, you can.
You need to come to if you are attending a FAFSA completion event, which is where you and your family are coming in to complete the FAFSA in a setting where you can get help from experts like FIA Access Partners or your high school counselors or financial aid people from the post-secondary schools. Make sure you come with a listing of the schools that you want to put on the FAFSA. The other thing that I saw sometimes last year too was that sometimes students recognize their college name under a different name than the actual kind of name that would be on the FAFSA. So make sure that you are looking at the school's website, you know what their actual, I won't say legal name, but the name that they go by, that so that you, when you put that information on the FAFSA, you're able to find the school. I think another good tip too to help find the school quicker is to not only keep a listing of the name of the school, but the city that the school is in. So then when you put that information in, it will really filter the list down and hopefully pull back the name a lot quicker. Because I did see that, you know, with some families where, you know, something small might have changed with the school's name. The student wasn't aware of that, and so they couldn't find the school when they pulled up in the FAFSA. So then we would have to Google the school's website, get the correct name, get the city, and it just created, you know, a delay in them being able to pull that information back. So.
And while they're looking, some of the schools, if you go to their financial aid page, some of them actually list their federal school code. And so you can search by other credentials, like we just talked about, the name, city, and state, or you can put in the school code. So either way, it makes it a lot easier if they do that research before they actually show up.
And just be aware too, some big schools like Penn State, even though you might be going to a branch campus, Penn State processes all of their financial aid under the main campus. So regardless of what branch you're going to, you're going to put that that main campus on your FAFSA form.
So for the students and the families, I think we got them started with the what they can do now. For the counselors or those who are assisting families, just a few tips I can think of. Make sure that you all are prepared. Make sure you know the resources that are available to you. Again, 13 higher education access partners, and we each represent certain counties, so you can reach out to all of the access partners, find yours. If you need assistance, you're not in it alone, whether it's a FAFSA completion, whether it's a financial aid night, or maybe just some simple questions where you need to connect the families with us to get the information that they need. Please do so. Also, the post-secondary schools, they are great resources as well. And talking to the post-secondary schools, a lot of times they're saying we're totally open to them asking us questions ahead of time because it's easier to answer the question than it is for them to make the corrections on the other end or delay them responding to anything. If they have special circumstances that are out there, you're completing the form and you're going to stay in touch with the schools anyway. So these are things to know. Who are the financial aid offices? How do you reach them? If you have a special circumstance, maybe your situation for 2023, which is the federal tax information that they're going to look the year that they're looking for, maybe it looks different than what it does now, and you know you're going to need to reach out to the school, figure out who those contact folks are. Yeah. You can already have that list created now. You don't have to wait until the very end in order to do so. Anything else we missed for?
I think too, if you are having an event, we do have promotional materials on our website that you can use to promote your events. You know, we have posters, we have all different types of
toolkits
flyers,
in general, FAFSA toolkit and a financial aid toolkit.
Where you can get all types of materials. So take a look at that information. We do have resources already created for you to help promote those events and provide materials to your students and parents. So please make sure that you take a look at the resources available on our website. And
then some other websites I still just like to mention, and we've mentioned them time again. Again, studentaid.gov, that's kind of what we say is your one-stop shop for all federal student aid. That is where you will go to create your FAFSA, your studentaid.gov account. That's where you're going to go to complete the FAFSA application and get all sorts of information about federal aid in general or financial aid in general. Also, FAFSA.gov is still, if you want to go to FAFSA.gov, it's still studentaid.gov, but it's the landing page to the new FAFSA. And if you went out there now, you'll see it'll say 25-26 coming soon, and you can get more information, and it gives you things that you can do and how to prepare right now. So I think that's nice to look at. But you, again, can still get there through studentaid.gov. Of course, our website, FIA.org. I would like to call that our one-stop shop for state aid, but we also give you plenty of information on the federal level, the state level, and then just tips in general about college and career planning. We also have the underlying My Smart Borrowing, educationplanner.org. You can deal with it. collegecost.ed.gov. I think I'm throwing them all out because these are just some great ones. And one of my favorite things to do is to encourage students to go directly to the post-secondary schools websites, because a lot of them have financial literacy information on there, FAFSA information on there, and additional tips that can kind of guide them through this process. What's next? So how do they prepare now? What's next? What I say is stay on the lookout for that FAFSA to open up. It's going to be available by December 1st. Fingers crossed it might open early. I don't think it will. You think? I don't think it's going to come any sooner. But
I doubt it will, but it could. It's a possibility.
It's right around the corner, though.
I will say, though, I usually advise families to kind of stay away from the site when it first comes out.
That's my next point.
You know, everyone in the country is going to be hitting that site on December 1st. And so just to save your time, the headache of having, you know, the site hold or possibly
crash,
even go down because too many people are hitting the site at the same time, I usually say, you know, wait a week. You know, that gives a lot of other people time, and you know, even if you did your FAFSA for the following week, you're going to be well ahead of the curve as far as meeting your school's deadline. So, you know, just to save some headache, just avoid it on the first week. Go to it the second week, and usually by that time, a lot less activity is hitting the site, and you can get through the process a lot quicker.
And be patient. So pack your patience. It's what I tell everyone. I know last year it was kind of like when it finally opened. That's what happened. Everybody hit it at the same time. It's like, I can't get in, I can't get in, I can't get in. And that's with anything. If everybody rushes that same day, any platform, most platforms can only handle so much. So take your time, don't rush, pack your patience. If it's not available at the time you're going in, try another time, try later. Just as long as you're in before any of those deadlines, which is why it's good to understand what these deadlines are. Last year, most schools were very, very lenient just because of what was going on. So I think they would be as well. And the other thing is, if you do run into difficulty, make sure you reach out, get the assistance, and stay in touch with the school. So if by chance, hope fingers are crossed that nothing goes wrong, everything is smooth sailing, but by chance it's not, and the student is cutting it close with a deadline for a particular school, reach out to that school's financial aid office to communicate, hey, these are the challenges I'm having. They may have some tips for them, but at least they know it's not because they're not trying. These are the system issues that I'm dealing with. I'm assuming if that's the case, it won't be the school's first time hearing it, but it just saves them. However, we're hopeful that that is not going to be the case because, again, like you said, you know, you've seen some of the beta testing. So far, things seem to be, for the most part, going well. So hopefully it all works.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Any other tips or suggestions? Or
I would just just to mirror what you said about financial aid offices, don't be afraid to talk to the financial aid offices. You know, if you need help, that's what they're there for, to help you with financial aid. So, you know, once you get your FAFSA started and that's submitted to the school, and then you're accepted into the school, those colleges will give you your financial aid offer, and then that's how you'll get the ball rolling to make sure you have your funding in place to be able to go to the school that you want to. But don't be afraid to connect with those financial aid offices and ask your questions, and you know, make sure you're on the same page in regards to what your plan is.
Absolutely. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. I'm looking forward to a 25-26 FAFSA because I can personally say, just being honest, that was a lot. 24-25 was a lot for everyone involved. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm hopeful that things will work well for the students, for the schools, for even us at FIA, so that it's a great year and it's only going to get better from here on out. So if anyone has any questions or concerns, remember you can find us at FIA.org, PHEAA.org. We always encourage everyone to continue to go back and listen to the past podcast episodes that we have, because we have lots of information on FAFSA completions, things like that. The other thing I mentioned is that whether it's an in-person session or a virtual session. FIA hosts virtual sessions, and you can find them at pheaa.org/virtual. I was stumbling
Right.
over that one. So let me say it again for clarity. FIA.org/virtual. And you can find them. And I do know we have one coming up, a FAFSA session coming up December 11th. It's going to be a step-by-step, I think, on financial aid or FAFSA completion. So it's going to be a really good one. I think I'm co-hosting that one with maybe Michael. So it's going to be a really good one. So Michael's one of our other access partners for those of you who may not know.
And we're actually having one tonight on how to create a studentaid.gov account. So even if you're listening to this podcast after, I'm sure you'll listen to it after today, you can go back and look at the recording if you need help on how to create that studentaid.gov account on our website, fia.org/virtual.
All right, so that's it for our latest Hot Topic segment. So again, I'm Tiffanie Diona.
I'm Deanna Brown.
And thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.